Hey heroes, and welcome to another Uncanny episode of History of the Marvel Universe. This channel is sponsored in part by Patreon supporters. If you would like to contribute and vote in monthly polls that help decide what topics get covered on the channel, then you can sign up for an amount of your choosing over at patreon.com/MaryMarvelite. The link is in the description below, along with other places you can find me. The storied history of Ireland's Cassidy clan begins over 1,000 years ago with a mighty warrior named Liam Cassidy, who defended the shores of County Mayo from Viking raiders, rival chieftains, and even mystical threats from the land of the fairies. Amidst these adventures, his staunchest ally and closest friend was a diminutive, enchanted being named Malachi Quinn. While the area remained fairly remote, Liam Cassidy made his home atop the granite cliffs of Cassidy Crag, where he constructed an impressive fortified castle overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, Cassidy Keep. Over the following centuries, this fortress became the Cassidy family's ancestral home, as tales of adventure and heroism were passed down in the noble lineage, along with secrets, feuds, and tragedies. Throughout the generations, Cassidy Keep remained a safe haven for Malachi Quinn's people, who were referred to as the Families, but commonly became known as Leprechauns. Seneschals watched over the keep and its leprechaun inhabitants, and in recent decades these duties fell to a man named Eamon O'Donnell. Meanwhile, Shawn Cassidy was born and raised in his family's ancestral home, where he happily fantasized about being an adventurer and hero. Then, during his adolescence, his mutant powers manifested, and he discovered his superhuman abilities. Not only could he produce a sonic scream with a variety of effects depending on factors like the frequency and intensity, but he could even direct his sonic vibrations with reflexive psionic powers to fly at speeds of up to Mach 1. While he mastered these abilities quickly as their use came naturally to him, he soon realized that the sound of his screams frightened the community's superstitious elders, who likened his wails to those of the Banshees from Irish folklore, and he elected to hide his abilities from most. As he grew up, Shawn developed a rivalry with his older cousin, a smooth-talking, Oxford-educated ladies' man named Thomas Samuel Eamon Cassidy, who was also secretly a mutant. His power was to fire bursts of heat or concussive force by channeling energy from his body through a wooden implement. Tom was actually next in line to inherit the family's estate, but he was also a gambler who liked to live dangerously and lost his inheritance to Shawn in an ill-advised wager. One day, as a young adult, Shawn was hitchhiking back home after attending a concert in Northern Ireland, only to be accosted by a crooked cop who was determined to arrest Shawn, despite there being no evidence of any actual wrongdoing. However, he was rescued by a motorcyclist who just so happened to be passing by the scene. The cop, one Sergeant McLanahan, gave chase and opened fire on the two as they fled, hitting the back tire of the motorcycle and causing the biker to careen off the edge of a nearby cliff. Fortunately, Shawn was able to rescue himself and the biker with his powers, flying them both back to Cassidy Keep, where he was shocked to find that his savior was a beautiful young woman. She was initially upset by the loss of her bike, but as the adrenaline wore off, what happened started to sink in. She introduced herself as Maeve Rourke. However, Tom was equally captivated by her beauty, much to the annoyance of Shawn, who often felt like an uncultured rube around his more sophisticated cousin. Initially, Maeve was as smitten with Shawn as he was with her, but over the next several months, the two cousins vied for her affection, and as she grew close to both, she was uncertain of what to do. Things came to a head the following spring when Maeve asked Shawn to escort her to the university ball. And as he made his way there, he was run off the road by a vengeful Sergeant McLanahan. Shawn survived the crash and made it back home, but was badly injured. Not wanting Maeve to be alone for the evening, he asked his cousin to go in his stead, and Tom was happy to oblige. Initially, Tom kept quiet about what happened with Shawn, simply saying that he wasn't coming, but he ultimately told Maeve the truth and she rushed off to be at Shawn's side, while declaring that she appreciated Tom's honesty and considered him her dearest friend. After that, Shawn and Maeve began a serious relationship and eventually married, with Tom serving as his cousin's best man. However, the darkness in Tom's heart rapidly grew, and he left ostensibly to become a soldier of fortune, but also operated as an international jewel thief and became known as Black Tom Cassidy. Shawn, meanwhile, earned a science degree from Trinity College in Dublin, but ultimately went into police work and became an Interpol agent. On one mission, he pursued a Russian serial killer, Arkady Rosovich, alongside a French Interpol agent named Inspector Magritte Devereaux. In truth, Arkady was a mutant who'd been experimented on by the Soviets in the 1960s, but escaped from Russian custody. While there were those in the international police who didn't even want to acknowledge Arkady's existence, Cassidy's hunt was aided by an enigmatic benefactor from outside the organization. While Shawn didn't know his ally's identity, most of you will recognize him as Magneto, and he primarily helped because he knew that Arkady's activities would be detrimental to mutant rights in the long term. In any event, Arkady openly invited Cassidy to kill him rather than allow himself to be used as a weapon by his government, and when Shawn refused, Arkady used his mutant death spore power to kill Inspector Devereaux. Enraged, Shawn shot Arkady several times in response, but disabled and arrested him without killing him. Arkady was then turned over to the Russian authorities, and while he was placed in the care of a special interest group that experimented on him further, he was ultimately placed in suspended animation due to their inability to fully contain his death spores. Years later, Shawn Cassidy would learn about this and partially blame himself for Arkady's eventual return as the cyborg Omega Red. Missions like these often kept Shawn away from home for long stretches at a time, and during a particularly lengthy deep cover assignment, his wife Maeve gave birth to their daughter, Teresa Rourke Cassidy, before Shawn even knew she was pregnant. The following summer, while Shawn was still away, Maeve and Teresa were caught in the blast when a group of militant Irish Republicans conducted a terrorist bombing in Dublin. Maeve was killed in the explosion, and it was believed that Teresa perished as well. However, the infant girl miraculously survived and was rescued by her cousin, Black Tom Cassidy, who she would come to regard as an uncle. When Shawn returned, Tom intended on telling him about his daughter, but before he could, Shawn lashed out with his sonic scream, blaming his cousin for not protecting Maeve. With his leg badly broken, leaving him with a limp, Black Tom decided to keep Teresa's existence a secret, raising her as his own. Anyone else who knew of her birth still believed that she died with her mother in the IRA bombing, and so nobody ever broached the subject with Shawn in the hopes of sparing him further pain. Hoping to ease his grief, Shawn Cassidy threw himself into his police work and continued to spend time away from home. In one mission, he and a fellow agent, Daniel Pyre, attempted to execute a carefully planned bust on a notorious mobster known only as Almodovar. However, this job was interrupted by the masked mercenary Deadpool, whose intervention may have saved Shawn's life, but also ruined the operation by killing their target. Shawn also spent some time working with the NYPD alongside an officer named Lowell Fontaine. During this period, he briefly clashed with the Dark Beast, who had seemingly abducted a young Emma Frost. For those unaware, the Dark Beast was a time-displaced variant of Hank McCoy from the Age of Apocalypse reality. Rendered partially amnesiac by the temporal crossing, Dark Beast actually allied with Emma, who used her burgeoning telepathic powers to help restore his mind, also erasing Shawn's memories of the whole encounter. After that, Shawn Cassidy returned to Interpol and tracked a French jewel thief to Calgary, Alberta. As luck would have it, a barroom brawl involving the mutant adventurer Logan, aka Wolverine, proved to be the perfect distraction, allowing Cassidy and the Canadian authorities to apprehend their target. In the midst of all of this, Black Tom was getting more involved in his own illegal activities, but wanted to keep Teresa away from his life of crime, and sent her to attend a private Catholic school. Not understanding his motivations, Teresa felt abandoned, and at age 13 she began experimenting with alcohol as a way to numb the pain, which quickly led her down the slippery path to addiction. Finally, after over a decade of international assignments, Shawn Cassidy returned to Ireland and led an undercover operation that targeted his own cousin's criminal activities. While he continued to remain ignorant of his own daughter's existence, Shawn did succeed in apprehending his cousin, and Black Tom Cassidy was sentenced to 5 years in prison for black marketeering. 15 years old at the time, Teresa learned of Tom's imprisonment, which only caused her drinking to worsen. At some point during her adolescence, she also discovered the sonic superpowers that she'd inherited from her father. Meanwhile, as the existence of superhuman mutants became more widely known, an alien from the Sirius star system decided to use them to amass power and influence on Earth and passed himself off as one of their own. Under the alias the Mutant Master, this alien founded the subversive organization Factor 3, named thus because he wished to become the third major world power alongside Russia and the United States, and recruited a number of mutant criminals, including Mastermind, the Blob, Vanisher, Changeling, and Unis the Untouchable. They also employed a human named Brian Dunlap, aka the Ogre, who lacked superhuman abilities but possessed considerable inventive genius. Having learned of Cassidy's mutant powers, Interpol wanted him to infiltrate the rising organization. However, Shawn had grown increasingly disillusioned with police work and left to become a freelance operative codenamed Banshee. He traveled to New York and even dabbled in minor crimes, but in doing so ironically caught Factor 3's attention. They attempted to recruit Banshee, and when he refused, the Ogre outfitted him with an explosive headband that couldn't be tampered with or removed, forcing his compliance. Perceiving the X-Men as a threat, the Mutant Master tasked Banshee and Ogre with abducting their leader, Professor Xavier. In the ensuing conflict, the Ogre's control panel was destroyed by the power-copying X-Man, the Mimic, which allowed Xavier to remove Banshee's explosive headband without setting it off. Grateful to his new allies, Banshee started his own investigation into their mutual foes and tracked Factor 3 to Central Europe. There, he was subdued by one of their enemies' arachnoid robots and taken captive, but not before sending a coded message to the X-Men. Naturally, the whole situation eventually culminated in a battle between the Uncanny X-Men and the Mutant Master's Factor 3 forces. However, when Changeling and the other criminals learned that the so-called Mutant Master was a threat to the Earth in general, he turned the androids on them as well. This conflict finally came to an end when Banshee awakened and used a precisely pitched sonic scream to wipe out the Mutant Master's machines. This also exposed their enemy's true alien form, and the Syrian elected to self-destruct rather than accept being captured. After that ordeal, Banshee tried to keep a low profile for a while, although he was drawn into further conflicts, like when the mutants were being targeted by Larry Trask's Mark II Sentinels. Apparently a fan of American country music, Shawn Cassidy subsequently decided to lay low in Nashville, Tennessee. While there, he had a chance encounter with Captain America and the Falcon, the former of which had been framed for murder by a subversive organization known as the Secret Empire. With other mutants having gone missing, Banshee assumed the worst and attacked the two masked men, ultimately gaining the upper hand. The fight was interrupted by Cyclops, but Banshee was unsure of who to trust in that situation and subdued his ally before escaping. In truth, the missing mutants had been abducted by the aforementioned Secret Empire, and Captain America ultimately joined forces with Cyclops, Xavier, and Jean Grey to help free them. Banshee remained in Tennessee and later decided to visit Memphis, this time briefly clashing with the Japanese mutant Shiro Yoshida, aka Sunfire, before the two bonded over a shared interest in American music. It was only 2 days after that when Banshee and Sunfire were both recruited to save the X-Men from the living island Krakoa, which is an incident we've talked about on the channel a number of times before. Other mutants recruited for this notable mission included Colossus, Storm, Thunderbird, Nightcrawler, and of course, Wolverine. Led by Cyclops, who'd escaped from the living island, this all-new, all-different team of X-Men battled Krakoa and ultimately rescued the captive mutants. The mission was successfully completed, but Sunfire left shortly thereafter, as did most of the original X-Men. Banshee considered leaving as well, feeling that he was too old compared to the others, the enigmatic Wolverine being an unknown quantity in that regard. However, Xavier and Cyclops convinced him to stay, and he officially became a member of the team for the first time. Feeling like he'd finally found a place to belong, Banshee settled quickly into the life of an X-Man. However, this was not without dangers, which became evident when his reckless teammate, Thunderbird, was killed during a conflict with the notorious Magiadon Count Nefaria. As the eldest active member of the team, once again aside from the enigmatic Wolverine, Shawn Cassidy served as a confidant to the similarly aged Xavier. During this time, he also met Xavier's ally, a Scottish geneticist named Moira McTaggart, to whom he was immediately drawn. She came to the X-Mansion under the pretense of being a housekeeper, but of course there was much more to her than met the eye. Shawn and Moira soon became close, and a romance began to blossom between them. Meanwhile, Black Tom Cassidy was released from prison and forged a criminal partnership with Xavier's mystically empowered stepbrother, Kane Marco, better known as the Unstoppable Juggernaut. Soon afterwards, they were hired by an alien known as Eric the Red, who sought to eliminate the X-Men on behalf of the Shi'ar Emperor Daken. We talked about the reasoning for that elsewhere on the channel, so for more on Shi'ar politics, you can refer to my videos on Gladiator and Deathbird. Black Tom also tricked his way back into Cassidy Keep, taking the Juggernaut with him and imprisoning many of the leprechauns who lived there, keeping them as hostages. When Banshee was then notified that he had inherited Cassidy Keep, he brought the X-Men to his ancestral home, inadvertently leading them right into Black Tom's trap. But in the ensuing battle, the heroic mutants were aided by leprechauns who'd escaped the villain's grasp. Cassidy clashed with his criminal cousin once again, and was ultimately victorious when Tom fell into the ocean below. The Juggernaut dove in after him, but of course both villains survived and escaped, later working with the flamboyant assassin Arcade. In the meantime, Banshee continued to have adventures with the X-Men, one of which brought him into conflict with a villain named Moses Magnum, who threatened to destroy all of Japan. Shawn succeeded in saving the island nation using his sonic scream to counter Magnum's weapon, but doing so overtaxed his voice, leaving him unable to use his powers. He nonetheless continued to aid the team in an advisory capacity, including on a mission that pitted the X-Men against Moira McTaggart's unstable reality-warping son, Proteus. In the wake of that battle, the depowered Banshee decided to retire from active duty and returned with Moira to her mutant research facility on Scotland's Muir Island. There was a subsequent incident in which Shawn used his non-mutant skills alongside other erstwhile X-Men to help rescue Moira and other allies of the team from Arcade's deadly amusement park, Murder World. Meanwhile, Black Tom learned that the now adult Teresa Cassidy had inherited her father's mutant powers and recruited her into his life of crime. Missing him after so much time apart, Teresa agreed to join him, and the two often shared a drink after a successful heist. Teresa did have doubts about what she was doing, but once again relied on alcohol as a coping mechanism, using hard liquor to silence her conscience. Becoming known as Siren, she accompanied Black Tom and the Juggernaut to San Francisco, where an attempted bank robbery drew the attention of the masked wall crawler Spider-Woman, who ultimately joined forces with the X-Men to defeat these foes. Not wanting Teresa to take the fall, Tom exonerated her of any wrongdoing and wrote a letter to Shawn explaining who she was, which Teresa herself delivered. The long-separated father and daughter were finally united, and while their relationship was sometimes uneasy due to his years of absence, they could finally start to build one. Later, Shawn was attacked by someone who appeared to be his fallen comrade, John Proudstar, aka Thunderbird. In truth, his assailant was John's brother, James Proudstar, who blamed Xavier for Thunderbird's death. Adopting his fallen sibling's identity, the new Thunderbird abducted Shawn to lure the X-Men into a trap, but ultimately found himself unable to strike down his target in cold blood, and relented. After that, there was an incident in which the Sentinel Master Mold mentally manipulated Moira McTaggart into developing a mutant malady called the Retribution Virus. Shawn was afflicted by the disease, but even while under Master Mold's control, Moira couldn't help but create an antidote alongside the virus. In the end, not only was Banshee cured, but his powers began to return as well, allowing him to deliver the finishing blow to Master Mold. Able to fly once again, Banshee subsequently saved another X-Men ally, Lorna Dane, retrieving her from a sinking ship during a time in which her power set had been altered and she lacked her magnetic abilities. He brought Lorna back to Moira's lab on Muir Island, but not long after that the facility was attacked by cyborg mercenaries known as the Reavers. Shawn was wounded in the assault, but the Morlock healer was able to save his life and complete the restoration of his powers, bringing them back to their peak. Banshee then helped repel the invading Reavers alongside a makeshift X-Men team who were also aided by Mystique's government-sponsored mutant team Freedom Force. In the wake of this, Banshee befriended the mutant machinesmith Forge, who had come to the island alongside Freedom Force. With the core X-Men team missing and presumed dead after an encounter with the mystical adversary, Banshee and Forge agreed to join forces and search for them. At the same time, Shawn began to notice that Moira was acting strangely, unaware that she was being manipulated by a psionic entity known as the Shadow King. While all of that was going on, the Irish government dispatched a team of super agents known as the Kinsmen to recruit Shawn Cassidy and force him to submit to a lengthy and overdue debriefing. This team consisted of Wee One, Boulder, Highlander, Rapscallion, and Dyke. They were sent to Cassidy Keep to find him, and while Shawn wasn't there, Teresa single-handedly defended her ancestral home and drove off the overly aggressive agents. Meanwhile, Banshee and Forge joined forces with Jean Grey, who at the time was a member of X-Factor, alongside the other founding X-Men. They subsequently clashed with a flesh-shaping Morlock named Mask, who forcibly transfigured Jean and Shawn, preventing the latter from using his powers. With help from Colossus, they were ultimately victorious, and Forge was fortunately able to ensure that Banshee and Jean were restored to normal. After that, Banshee and Forge teamed up with Storm, Gambit, the Fantastic Four, Cable's new Mutants team, and X-Factor in a battle against Ahab, a cyborg mutant hunter from the Days of Future Past timeline. They also aided the various X teams in a conflict referred to as the Extinction Agenda, in which they fought against another notorious cyborg, Cameron Hodge, on the island nation of Genosha. After that, the Moira situation was resolved when X-Factor and the X-Men confronted the Shadow King, who had possessed Xavier's son, Legion. In the end, the X-teams defeated the Shadow King and freed the inhabitants of Muir Island from its influence. In the wake of this, Banshee remained an ally to the X-Men and was often a member of the team, but if you want to know about his further adventures, you'll just have to let me know. Teresa, meanwhile, was also present for the battle with the Shadow King, after which she left Muir Island to embark on a journey of self-discovery. She traveled to New York, where she battled her former allies, the Juggernaut and Black Tom Cassidy. She likely couldn't have won that fight alone, but was aided by Cable and his mutant strike team, which had been recently rechristened X-Force. This team also included James Proudstar, who had taken the codename Warpath, and Teresa ultimately joined as well. But unfortunately, that is all I have for you this week, and so thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it on your favorite social media. As always, the issues referenced in this video are listed in the description below if you would like to read them for yourself, as well as links to other places you can find me. Let me give a special shout out to all of my Patreon and Ko-fi supporters, Twitch subscribers, and YouTube members who help make the channel possible. By signing up for any ongoing amount on any of these platforms, you'll get your name in these special thanks here, but Patreon is the one that helps determine what topics get covered on the channel via monthly polls. That being said, if there's anything in particular that you want me to talk about, be sure to let me know in the comments. But that is indeed all I have for you this week, and so until next time, true believers, Excelsior!